during these journeys of the Aurora Forum, we are talking about something which is very important, and that is the action of individuals, of civil society, of organizations of people that have taken the initiative to transform and to protect the world. And I think that in that discussion, it is also important not to forget that there is a set of institutions, of rules that have been created little by little, sometimes at great human and economic cost, and that in many ways in their mission coincide with the aspirations of the people, of the peoples of this world. And I am making reference to the institutions, to the rules, to international law that constitute the multilateral system. During the first half of the 20th century, and certainly before that time, humanity went through very dramatic atrocities. We are here now in a country that endured one of them, but we also know about the First War and the Second World War. And after all those tragedies, the international community decided that it was very important to prevent that to happen again. And in order to do so, those founding fathers and mothers of the international system decided to put in place very important covenants and institutions that have existed ever since. It will not be my mission this afternoon to provide a long list of accomplishments of those institutions. It will take me perhaps days. All I can say is that those institutions have had great accomplishments, not only in delivering things that we can see in very concrete terms, both in terms of peace and security, in terms of conflict resolution, in terms of economic prosperity, but also in terms that we haven't seen because it was about to prevent even bigger tragedies to happen. Those institutions, I think, are very important. And of course, these are institutions that, as any human creation, are not perfect, and frequently they are subject, fairly or unfairly, to numerous attacks and critiques. However, I think this moment is even more significant because in recent years, and I would say from the part of great powers, and sadly, I say it with sadness, from the part of the biggest power, and the biggest power that actually led the construction of those institutions are under severe attack. I don't want to be dramatic in any way, but last week when I was in Geneva, at the United Nations place in Geneva, one of the news was, for example, that in a few weeks, the United Nations will not have funds to pay its payroll. Not too long ago, Mary and I were, along with other elders, in a refugee camp in Ethiopia, and we could see, on the one hand, how admirable the work that they do there is, but we also saw how dramatic the lack of resources is for the United Nations organization charged with supporting refugees to undertake and carry out its mission. But there are other big issues that certainly confirm my concern, and I hope your own concern. Over the last 2 years, we have seen the United States withdrawing from announcing that they will do it in 2020 from the Paris Climate Agreement. We have heard that the United States, having been originally participating in the negotiations on the Compact for International Migration, suddenly withdrew from those negotiations and simply didn't attend the conference where this compact was adopted by other countries. We have heard that the United States, which as a state had skillfully and admirably negotiated a nuclear agreement with Iran, along with other partners, important partners, withdrew from that agreement. We have read that the United States announced unilaterally that it was suspended the NFF, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Agreement, which now Russia has happily accepted to suspend too. So a new nuclear threat is on our head. And we know that the START agreement, which was negotiated in 2011, will be over in 2021, and that so far there is no movement to negotiate that nuclear agreement. We also know that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, the institution in charge of providing the rules that by which countries conduct international trade, is also under a severe threat, and that the United States has been blocking the appointment of the judges of the appellate body of the World Trade Organization, and that in December, other things equal, the World Trade Organization will have lost its most important instrument to enforce the decisions that countries take in that organization. We also know that the United States has withdrawn from UNESCO. But of course, it's not only about the United States. The other great powers either had been passive, ignorant, and in some cases, very pleased to go along with this new picture. And that new picture is that the world will not be ruled by rules and institutions, but that the world will be ruled by the law of the jungle. It will be ruled by negotiations based not on reason, not on international law, but rather ruled by negotiations based in force. And that, I think, is a terrible news that we cannot accept. That's a terrible news that young people cannot accept, because particularly weak countries like Armenia, like my own country, Mexico, the only defense that we have against the abuse of the powerful is international law, and the institutions commanded to apply international law. And that is why, along with my fellow elders under the chairmanship of Mary Robinson, we have taken up the task to be loud and clear on this issue, to speak truth to power also on this, and say you shouldn't be undermining the institutions that you yourself have constructed for the protection, for the prosperity of humanity. And therefore, I will make you accountable for this undermining of the institutions. The future generations will accuse us, we the adults, the ones that are in the later stage of our life, for not having put up the defense of those institutions. And we do it because we don't want the atrocities that have taken place in the past to be repeated, because we want the conflicts that, as we speak, are taking place in the world not to carry on causing so much human tragedy, because we want young people to live in a world in which not only there are conditions for prosperity, but also that we inherit you an environment in which you can have a healthy, prosperous, and happy life. And for all of that, dear friends, I invite you to join the cause of defending the multilateral system. Thank you. And now, if there is some time for questions, I try to be brief. I will be happy to react to your questions, observations. There's a gentleman here. Can you provide a microphone?
It was really inspiring. We haven't actually met for almost a decade. I spent many years at the World Health Organization, and I think I'd love to hear your comments about the threats to the specialized agencies, where their benefit to public health and the environment are also being deeply eroded by funding cuts, budget withdrawals, and distortions of the policy environment itself.
Well, everything you said provides a very vivid and truthful description of what is happening. I was in Geneva last week and had the opportunity to talk to people that work or represent countries at many of these organizations. And in all cases, the situation is, to say it mildly, stressful, if not dramatic. Little by little, sometimes not so little by little, but rather violently, these organizations are being disempowered to accomplish their mission. There seems to be a systematic plan, not only to attack them rhetorically, but also to cut their legs and not allow them to move forward. And this is not an accusation that I am just making out of the outrage that I feel for this situation. I think in the very speech given by President Trump a few weeks ago at the United Nations, he expressed very openly, that we have to go against globalists and we have to be nationalists. And that is very problematic in many ways, because first and foremost, I would say that there shouldn't be a contradiction between a person loving his or her country and at the same time caring about international peace, about international prosperity, about international solidarity. You will not be embarrassed to say I am a Mexican of X country by saying I am supporting the cause against climate change. I am supporting the end of conflict in the Middle East. I am supporting the end of conflict in Africa. I am against hunger, and we have to do something about it. We have to go for universal health coverage, or care, as you want to call it. Those are international causes, and that is not in conflict with my condition and pride of being Mexican, right? So I think we have to keep moving.
I just want to ask a question about how do you think at this time you can strengthen individual countries' commitment to international organizations and mechanisms when, you know, a lot of leading countries, for example, the countries in Security Council, are not doing their best at, you know, sending resources or support to less privileged areas and all that?
Well, I think, I hope that those countries whose governments and whose citizens still believe that the multilateral system is important in their own national interest. And I want to emphasize this. You know, the multilateral system doesn't exist to do only international solidarity. The multilateral system is first and foremost in the national interest of each country, because it is the least expensive way to protect your own interests. When you come together with others, agree in international law, and the mechanisms to enforce that international law. So I would say that a bigger, powerful country are setting a very bad example by disregarding the multilateral system, by using the wrong terms for describing the relationship and the importance for them of the multilateral system. And perhaps the most dramatic example has to do with the question of nuclear proliferation, nuclear rearmament. You know, many years ago, many countries come together. I am very proud that my country was a leader in that, in the non-proliferation movement. And we agreed that we will not fabricate atomic bombs. That's the non-proliferation treaty. However, we said we do that on the condition that the nuclear armed states start moving in the direction of disarmament. But they haven't, well, they did comply after the fall of the Berlin Wall for a number of years. But now that has stopped. Now they are beginning, they call it modernize their nuclear arsenals. They are beginning to throw to the garbage the agreements that they signed before. So I think it's just a matter of time that we see other countries that had abide by their agreement to be part of the non-proliferation treaty to reconsider. And that will be a very sad and dangerous event for humanity at large.